So in this video, I'm going to cover how to teach an introductory class to an adult student or to a younger student that will be starting sketching for the first time. So when an adult student comes in for the very first time, you're probably going to be busy with the class, setting everything up, making sure everyone's organized. And so what I typically have them do is grab anything from the still life container. I grabbed 3 objects here. It doesn't matter what, you're not going to give any instruction to begin with. What you're going to do is have them set up their still life on the already set up still life stand that you have ready for class. And they are going to sit on the bench. Now remember, you're not going to give any instruction, so the adult student will typically come in. I do want you to ask the adult student if they're right-handed or left-handed, because that's going to determine the way the bench sits. If they're right-handed, the bench needs to be angled to the right. If they're left-handed, the bench needs to be angled to the left. Also, keep in mind the bench it can't be angled too much. You need to be able to see your drawing as well as the still life without having to turn. So since I'm right-handed, I'm going to turn the bench this way. And since I'm a new student and I don't know any better, I'm going to just sit down, kind of like this. This is what they typically do. And I'm going to start drawing. Give them a few minutes to kind of get their drawing in, kind of get acclimated to the class. And it also, like I said, gives you a little bit of time to help everyone else get started. Once they've done this, you give them like 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to come back to them and go over the next step. So once you have the student already warmed up with just drawing whatever they want, any way they want with no instruction, you're going to come in next and you're actually going to start instructing. Now the first class with an adult sketcher and even a child sketcher takes a lot of your time, so just be prepared for that. When you start, the first thing you need to teach them is how to sit properly. The most important thing is that the student is very comfortable. And what you want to do is make sure that their knees are facing the still life. They're sitting up straight, and you want to teach the violin grip. The violin grip is when you use all 4 fingers and your thumb. You use your whole arm to draw. A nice way to get them started is using what's called the infinity drill, doing a sideways figure 8, and just making sure they're using their shoulder and their arm and not drawing, with their hand. There's a few reasons why we hold the pencil this way. One is you want to sit back from your drawing and see, the still life, see the whole composition. It's more accurate. Also, you have more control with your arm than you do with your hand. And lastly, it helps you draw very lightly, which is important, and we've gone over in the past. You're going to want to make sure they have an eraser. And once they've gotten warmed up with the infinity drill, kind of just sketched a little bit, gotten used to holding the pencil this way, you want to set up 3 simple fruits for them. I typically start with a lemon, a pear, and an apple. They're great. And what you want to show them is that you're not going to look at an object, you don't want to look at the contour line of it, like say an apple. It looks very flat. It's hard to get a perfect outline of something. You want to look at the shapes that actually create it. So if I look at that apple, I see 2 major shapes. And you don't want a million different random shapes, like taking into account shadows and things like that. It's really just the simple shapes that make up the object. So if I'm looking at that apple there, I see a circle, kind of the top of it, and then I see a base, like that. If you want to really get into a lot more shapes, you can kind of start with, the center of the apple, kind of getting the bumps in here. But I want them to find the simple shapes. Actually, don't even get into the stem and things like that. You want to make sure that they understand the concept and understand finding the shapes that make it up. For the pear, what I see is really the big base and kind of this soft, top. And that's simple. You can just leave it there. For the lemon, I see a big oval and a little point, at the end. And that's it. So 2 to 3 simple shapes to create the object. So make sure they're not looking at, say, the pear and seeing maybe this, and okay, there's like a little shape, a shadow there, or, you know, a shape here. You're not doing that. You're just finding, like I said, basic shapes, like 2 to 3. And have them do that. Once they finish the first round of fruits, I would put up another 2 to 3 rounds, progressively getting more and more difficult. So fruits that have, or vegetables that have more shapes to it, like the eggplant or a pineapple or a pepper or things like that. But this would be the next step. The next step in introducing sketching to adults or to children would be grouping objects together. Once you fill the picture on a piece of paper, just go ahead and flip it over. For the adults, you're going to go through multiple pieces of paper. At the end of the class, you can just roll it up for them and they can take it home. But when you start, when they have the concept of getting simple shapes to create an object, the next step would be combining objects, doing multiple objects. And how you would start that is you find what's called the overall shape. The overall shape is the bottom of the lowest point of the object, the top of the highest point, and the widest points. If you kind of imagine a tightly wound band around these two objects, that is what is considered your overall shape. So for me, if I'm doing an overall shape here, mine's something like this. Now I'm drawing a little darker just for the video so you can see what I'm doing. In real life, this should be a super light drawing because you're going to be erasing this. This is just a simple preliminary sketch. So next, once you have your overall shape, this is kind of a guide, and it's especially useful when you're working, say, on a canvas or a limited size, you know, paper, where you know where everything's going to be. It helps you with your composition early on. So the next step is I would go in and find my simple shapes within the objects, just what you had been working on. And when I look at this, I see, okay, my tomato is here, the turnip is kind of here. I see a simple shape there, and then kind of a simple shape with the like leg of the turnip, I guess. Now, if I look at it, it doesn't, you know, fully fit to the form of my overall shape, and that's fine. It was just a preliminary, like I said, sketch. It's not going to be perfect first time. So now when I have my simple shapes, I want to do what's called relating my points. This is where you check and make sure everything is in the right place before getting any detail in your picture. If I tried to go in and get all this perfect little detail, say on the tomato, it's not going to be as accurate. And say I have the tomato in the wrong space and have to move it, that's going to be a total waste of time. So now I'm going to make sure everything is in the right place, it's where I want it, it's accurate before I go into my detail. So relating points is very useful. And what you do with that is you take a point on one object and relate it to a point on the other. So for instance, if I take the turnip, tip of the turnip, like I'm going to look at this point right here, and I'm going to see where does it relate to the tomato. Is it hitting kind of in the middle of the tomato? What point is that? So I noticed that my turnip is way too low. The head of the turnip needs to be kind of right here in the tomato, right? This is the center of the tomato. Yeah, like the turnip needs to move up quite a bit. But if I relate, say, this point of the turnip to the side of the tomato, there's a little gap in there. Now keep in mind when you're instructing somebody and you're relating points and they're relating points, if your vantage point is different from theirs, you're not going to see it. You have to kind of be at their level, sitting in their seat, to be able to see if their points are accurate. But if I relate that, there is a little space here. Where is the side of this compared to the side of the tomato? You can relate points into space as well. So say this turnip, you know, goes straight up from this point. How much space from that point is the side of the tomato? Same thing goes for the base down here. If I take a point on the bottom, relate it into space, where is that compared to the tomato? So once I start to get everything really where I want it, and now I see that this, you know, is more up here. I fixed the problem. And I realize this tail comes out further this way. And then I can start to find. So the more points that you relate on your picture, the more accurate your picture is going to be. So I'm slowly center, relate it down, and it's going to avoid that. So I'm going to start erasing any lines that I don't need. Once you get everything to where you want it, and it's everything's in the right position, then you can start getting in your details. And finish it up. Using your eraser, erase any old lines that you don't need, say the overall shape, any lines that were helping you, and so on. And you'll start to get your completed picture. So have them do a couple of these, relating points, finding simple shapes, and then finally finalizing the picture. Start with 2 objects, move to 3, even add a 4th. So they could do probably 2 or 3 of these within the first class. But make sure the structure is overall shape, the overall shape, I think I misspelled that. Simple shape, and last, relating your points. Using those 3 concepts, you get your final picture. The final lesson in the Introduction to Sketching for Adults and for Kids is the cylinder. This is the most difficult part for students typically, because if you look at a cylindrical object, it's symmetrical. It's even on both sides. So say I were to draw this cup, and a lot of times people will draw the top, they see that oval in the top, draw the side, draw one side, and then draw the bottom, and draw the other side. 1, this is not going to be even, and 2, they don't see kind of the rest of the cylinders that make up the object. If you turn it upside down, you see it. But you want to show people that you need to work simultaneously on both sides and really see the ovals and circles that make up an object. So if I look at a simple cylinder, a cup, we have them start with that. You want to start again with the approach to drawing that we just reviewed. You start with the simple shape. So here I'm going to start with kind of a soft rectangle. Then I do what's called the line of symmetry. It's a line that you just create from the top to the bottom and pull it down, and it helps guide you in working simultaneously on both sides and making it even. So when I look at this cup, I see really the top oval. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. And a simple cylinder that's even on all sides, you're going to have the same size oval on the bottom as you do on the top because it's completely even. So knowing that, I am going to draw the base here. Now I want to make sure it's about the right size, and that's where the overall shape really helps. And then I just connect, my sides of the cup. This one's easy because, it's a straight line. I have the bottom and I have the top. These curves should match, and that's what creates the turn for you when drawing cylindrical objects. So when I move on to more difficult round objects, like say, a vase that changes size, again, I start with the simple shape, and I'm even going to add a simple shape on the top here. So it can be, more than one, for a shape. Then I'm going to draw a line of symmetry. Then I'm going to find all the ovals that kind of create this. And what I do is every time it changes width, I want to find that oval. So for instance, the top, obviously it starts about here. Then it comes in at the neck, maybe a little bit lower. Then it actually comes out wide. Notice how mine are kind of layering. These are on top of one another a little bit because they're short. Then it reaches probably the widest width in the middle here, and then it starts to taper in. And I noticed mine was kind of long, so when I connect these sides, I get my vase. So it takes a little bit of practice. You don't need too many ovals. You don't want to stack them one on top of the other. But if it does change shape a lot, you're going to need quite a few. So for instance, this last one, again, I'm going to turn this over.
Can you just put the last one in the picture? I can't see both.
Okay. For this last one, I'm going to start again with simple shapes. I see that circle and I see kind of that soft, rectangle on top. I'm going to do a line of symmetry. And then I notice how it kind of comes in here. It tapers in. Oops, I went a little too wide. And then it kind of stays the same as it hits the round part of the base. The widest point would be about in here, and then it narrows in there. So then when I connect these, I work on the neck and then the body. And there is my vase. And that's it. So that would be the final lesson teaching a student in introductory classes. The final drawing that you're going to have them do is combining everything we just went over. So the final thing you'll have the introductory adult student do, or the child for their first sketching class, is do a final picture. And you're going to combine everything that you went over in that class. So you're going to have a cylindrical object and some fruits. You can talk a little bit about composition at this point, how it's important to have depth. If you line everything up on one kind of plane, it's very boring. So have them stagger and kind of create a little bit of depth in their composition. Just to give them, a kind of brief overview of that. Then when you start, you're going to start with your simple shape. So overall shape. To start, make sure it's the highest point, the widest points, and the lowest points. Then you're going to get your simple shapes in, like we discussed. So I'll find my apple, my lemon, and my vase.
Can you draw any darker?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to draw slightly darker than I normally do for the video so that you can see it. But keep in mind at this point, normally you should have very light lines. For my vase, the wine glass, I want to use my line of symmetry. I'm going to kind of focus on that a little bit more than the fruits at first. That's a little bit more difficult, and the fruits would be easier to move. So I'm going to get my simple shapes in there with a line of symmetry. And when I get it to about this point, where I think I have everything in, this needs to move up, I know. I'm going to relate my points. So when I relate the top of the lemon to the bottom of the cup, from my vantage point, they're actually touching. So my lemon needs to move up slightly. When I see the side of the apple compared to the bottom of the vase, it hits about in the middle of my apple. So that is fairly accurate. The side of the cup, if I pull it down, it hits I'm gonna pull my apple slightly out right there. If I use the side of the cup here and pull it down, that's about accurate. So once I get everything where I want it, lemon, I want to have that simple shape. And all my points seem to match up. Where's the top of the apple? The back here comes up slightly. So notice the more lines you relate, the more accurate it's going to be. Perfect. Here, okay. Here, perfect. Okay. So once everything is where I want it to be, I'm going to start to finalize the picture. So for the wine glass, I will start to find my ovals, bring it in here, kind of connect. Find my apple. Now my lines are kind of dark because of the video, but I am going to attempt to erase some of them. Don't worry about shadows, things like that. Just trying to get the final picture. So getting them to about this point, maybe a little further. Would be great. A nice thing to do, once they do get a final drawing, is to compare this picture that they just did to the first one that they did when they came in. So my picture, I didn't really get very far, or I took it off, but compare the picture that their final picture in class to the first picture that they did all on their own in class. And you'll see a dramatic result.